Now that everybody is here, welcome back everybody. This is of course the marine-based Indigenous Protected and Conserved webinar series at number 4. So welcome and thank you to everyone that's been with us through this whole process. Tonight we've got our speakers here. We're going to be taking a look at behind the scenes of cooperative management at Gwaii Haanas National Park Reserve, a National Conservation Area Reserve, and a Haida heritage site. Again, for those of you joining us for the first time tonight, my name is Beck Borchert. I'm the Marine Protected Areas Coordinator for the KMKNO, or the Mi'kmaq Rights Initiative. I'll just give you a little bit of background on who is bringing the webinar series to you tonight while everyone gets sorted. The KMKNO was created to oversee the negotiations and consultation processes between the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia, the province of Nova Scotia, and the government of Canada. So we're governed and we receive our mandates directly from the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs, and collectively we work on broader nation issues for the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. We're not doing this webinar series alone. We've had amazing partners with other Mi'kmaq organizations, and I see a lot of you guys are here tonight, so thank you for joining us in the webinars and also in the planning process. A thank you to UINR, the Unamaki Institute of Natural Resources. They're here representing the 5 Mi'kmaq communities on Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia. UNIR was formed to ensure the sustainable use and protection of natural resources while maintaining Unamaki Mi'kmaq traditions and worldviews. UINR has been instrumental in this whole process, and I thank you all that are here with us tonight and for all the work you've put in. We are, of course, also working with CMM, the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq. It's a nonprofit that works to proactively promote and assist Mi'kmaq communities in their initiatives towards self-determination and the enhancement of community, and they have also supported this series. So thank you to you guys, and thank you for being here with us tonight. We're also working with Oceans North, who supports marine conservation in partnership with Indigenous and coastal communities. So on behalf of all of us, welcome to the 4th webinar, or welcome back. Thank you for being here, everybody. I will take care of just a few quick housekeeping tidbits, and I'll try to speed through them for everyone so we can get to the good stuff. So as Heidi mentioned, please keep your cameras and your microphones off during the presentation tonight. If you do have any questions or comments that you want to get out of your head right away, please feel free to put them into the chat. Our facilitator will be monitoring that, and we'll make sure that all the questions get answered after the presentation. Just a note, the presentation tonight will be recorded and it will be released on our YouTube channel, which I put the link at the top of the chat for everybody to find if you haven't seen it already. So the presentation will be recorded at a later date, and all the other sessions have already been posted, sorry. Please note that the Q&A session, which will happen after the presentation, is not going to be recorded. We do that because we hope for a respectful and enticing discussion period following the presentation. And just a reminder that the series, and especially the Q&A period after the presentation, they are designed for Mi'kmaq and Indigenous persons to ask questions, to gain knowledge, and to build relationships. So if this doesn't directly apply to you, please feel free to just check out the YouTube videos that are available, some now and tonight's at a later date. With the housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to get started by reintroducing the wonderful Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall, who is with us again tonight. Albert Marshall is from Moose Clan of the Mi'kmaq Nation. He lives in Eskazoni and Unamaki, or Cape Breton. He's a fluent Mi'kmaq language speaker, a passionate advocate of cross-cultural understanding and healing, and he's a designated voice to environmental issues. Albert, I have heard that you are a great friend to many, and I'm emailing you so much, I feel like I'm almost going to make you my friend as well. It certainly shows in your dedication to being here with us over and over and over again. So thank you very much. And I'll pass it over to you to lead us through an opening prayer.
Thank you, Beck. First of all, let me humbly express my gratitude for allowing me in your circle. But first, we got to get ourselves grounded of why we are here and how we should go about exercising our inherent responsibilities. Not only how to take care of our source of life, but also as well of ensuring that we take care of ourselves as well, because the effort that's before us is going to require a collective effort. So the more people that are in wellness, they'll be able to exercise their inherent responsibilities. But first, isu wala liya. Sitantel asidel mi na mi don lagi ko na ko. Wala liya sitantel asidel mi. Mawidane. Rada mawiyom yedliya. Era molegal melwi ni galo ko kuru ko an kidas ko. Terus wakanda ne bidege kala hengina mo. Era mulai melu wijik sasudi. Pramane ki judes ne. Tante uji pasti kino da sasudi gisku wewas na sit kamo. Pramane busi ka baca jigero kiginen mami. Era mulai kucino sasudin. Praman mawana jideo siga putmat. Igene muinen melu kemi deo sokin. Praman kisia wates na wa. Tanu da luwa sin kisku. Igene muinen kemi deo timpoi. Pramane ki judes ne tako luda luwa sin. Ande jigo murdeno. Igene muinen mel dignodi. Ahmegi deo sokin. Pramane ki judes ne. Anokte ejit kisaru luwa ta kanyuda luwa. Igene muinen melu melgi deo sokin. Praman mawan nuda jideo. Luwa mun luwa an rasit kamo. Igene muinen mena aja we rokin. Praman kismau ya bokona maro. Kismau lugu di des. Dan kistel det parotes ne la mau sit kamo. Era mulle ni melui. Nega ya bokona muinen. La buakin tude mina keskadi. Buka idori tan tel lugu di la deti. Abaja sen khastu dia khabiksi wa tudu wona mugi gnori. Today we ask for the strength and the guidance to help us in our discussions as to how we can work together, help each other, support each other, so that the work that is before us will be done collectively. We ask for strength to help us overflow our hearts with love and compassion, care, and affection, not just with one another, but also to have that same sense of responsibility to the rest of our brothers and sisters, to the rest of our relatives, so that we will not forget how dependent and interconnected we are, not just with each other, but with this wonderful creation of ours. We ask you to give us the strength, guidance, by giving us the right words that heal and inform in a good way. We also ask for our brothers that have forgotten or have lost a relationship to this beautiful creation of ours. And we now thank the Creator for allowing us to come together as one and to use the gifts that we have been given and to employ those gifts so that not only this generation here, but also for the next 7 generations will not only have the same opportunities, but hopefully better. The environment will be better conditioned than the ones that we came upon. And that continue to give us the strength and the wisdom to continue this work that is before us, so that when our time ends here, we would feel some comfort that we did everything we can of ensuring not only our individual action, but collective action, will always be in harmony with our Earth Mother. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Albert. Thank you. Moving forward, I'd like to introduce the wonderful facilitator for our series. That is, of course, Dr. Heidi Wiegand. Dr. Wiegand is an assistant professor in management at Dalhousie University who focuses on leadership development, systematic discrimination, and resiliency. She has an extensive experience working with First Nation leaders and communities with a passion for cultivating self-governance practices and sustainable communities. Pretty cool. Heidi is currently exploring the role of cultural resiliency and how we reconnect socially during the COVID-19 pandemic, and has research and workshops developed to cumulative resilience leadership. Thanks for being here again with us, Heidi. I know we're in good hands with you. I'll pass it over to you to introduce our speakers for the night.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Beck. Much appreciated. I'm very excited about tonight's session, and I'm just going to take the opportunity to introduce our two speakers, and then we'll get into the heart of the presentation. So from the Nungaklugulans, Ernie Gladstone works for the Parks Canada as well as the Gwaii Haanas Field Unit Superintendent and co-chair of the Archipelago Management Board. In 2008, Ernie was awarded a Public Service Award of Excellence for his work in the Gwaii Haanas. Sudut Cindy Boyko is the Haida Nation co-chair, Haida Nation co-chair for the Archipelago Management Board. Previously, she was an elected representative of the Council of the Haida Nation and manager of the Hideaway Watchmen program. Ernie and Cindy both live on Haida Gwaii in the village of Skidegit. Together, they have co-chaired the Archipelago Management Board for over 2 decades. So it's a short introduction, but to a very powerful presentation. So we're going to have Beck show the presentation, and we're going to have both Ernie and Cindy guiding Beck along with when to switch slides. What we'll do is we'll just remind everybody, maybe if you could turn your videos and your mics off, just to make sure bandwidth is working for everybody. And we'll turn this over to you, Ernie.
Yeah, thanks for that, Heidi, and Beck and Albert Marshall as well for your words. It's interesting how we're such a long ways away, but we hear the same advice and wisdom from elders here out on Hideaway. So it's great to hear those words. Yeah, thanks for inviting both Cindy and I to be here today and to share some of the experiences that we've had. And so we're gonna talk a little bit about the recent political history that has led up to Gwaii Haanas, which is a protected area out on the west coast of out on the Pacific coast. Talk a little bit about the management structure that we have in place and how it works, and then go into some of the lessons that we've learned over the last 25 years or so. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time for some questions at the end. I don't know, Cindy, if you have anything to say on this introductory slide here.
I just want to start by saying Hawa for having us. You know, as Haida, we're ocean people. And so this presentation and what we're doing here is important to us. And we're honored to be asked to share our experience in hopes that it will help in other areas of the world whenever we can. And we're really happy to be here to do that. And I think one of the things that I have so much gratitude to be from a place on the ocean and the beauty it brings us, but the plenty and the also gratitude for the ability to work for these lands and waters in some small way that hopefully makes a difference. And so thank you for having us. And I also wanted to say how a deep hawa for that prayer. It was so beautiful. And I thank God for our elders. I thank the Creator for our elders. So looking forward to the rest of the night, hawa.
Maybe we'll go to the first slide there, Beck. I'm not sure if it's up. Oh, there we go. So yeah, just to help situate us. So we're located off the west coast of British Columbia on an island, Haida, Gwaii, just south of, we're just south of Alaska. You can actually see Alaska from the north end of Haida, Gwaii. And Gwaii Haanas is in the southern third of Haida, Gwaii. It's that darker green and shaded marine area. And so with the land and sea combined there, we have about 5,000 square kilometers of protected area. And it's, there's not much, there's nobody really living down there right now, but there is and we'll speak to some of the activities that are occurring down there. But in the past, there has been, upwards of 10 to 12,000 people living in that area. And we know this from our oral history and some of the archaeological work dating back more than 14,000 years. There's been people living with a connection to that area. Today, it's occupied by Hideaway Watchmen, which is a guardian program. We'll speak a little bit more to that a little later on. It's a place where Haida community members travel to gather food and to do traditional activities. It's a place where visitors from around the world come and experience the culture and the intact ecosystem down there. It's a place where fishermen continue to earn livelihoods. There's still commercial and recreational fishing activities going on down there. So yeah, lots of things happening. Maybe Cindy, do you have anything to add there?
Not at this point, no, thanks.
Okay. So we'll go to the next one, Beth. So, I mentioned, there's about 14,000 years of history, and it's only been in the last, my generation and Cindy's generation, and probably a few on the phone, but it's only been since the 70s and 80s that Gwaii Haanas has been considered a protected area. And there's three separate designations down there. And the first designation was made by the Haida Nation in 1985. And so it was designated as a Haida heritage site, so a form of a Indigenous protected area. And this was done under Haida law, under Haida authority, through the constitution of the Haida Nation. And at that same time, this designation was made. There was a lot of logging activities and other resource extraction activities happening in the place down there at that time. And so the Haida Nation led a standoff on a place called Lyle Island, where there was logging activities taking place. And it wasn't a protest like the protests we see. It wasn't considered a protest we see across the country right now. It was a standoff, and it was the Haida Nation upholding Haida law. It was upholding the following through on having the area set aside as a protected area, as a Haida heritage site. And that event got national and international attention. And over the following few years, Canada and discussions with Canada and BC were occurring, and Canada and BC also agreed that the area would be set aside as a protected area. And then in 1993, Canada and the Haida Nation signed what we call the Gwaii Haanas Agreement. That's a cooperative management agreement that creates the Archipelago Management Board that Cindy and I are part of, and kind of it guides how we manage today. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the following slides as well. And so following that agreement, Canada designated the lands in Gwaii Haanas as a national park reserve under the National Parks Act. And then in 2010, we signed another agreement called the Gwaii Haanas Marine Agreement, which allowed for kind of paved the way for Canada to create a national marine conservation area in those waters surrounding the terrestrial area. So the Haida Nation designation in '85 included both protected area in both the land and waters, and the later designations through the National Parks Act and the National Marine Conservation Areas Act allowed for Canada's protected area boundaries to align with the Haida protected area boundaries. In this poll you see on the slide here was a poll that the Archipelago Management Board commissioned and was raised in Gwaii Haanas in 2013, and we commissioned that to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the relationship that Canada and Haida Nation have in working together to manage that area. And I'll stop there, Cindy, in case you have something to add there.
The only thing I'd add here is that we had those designations starting in 1985, but we've been using those areas long before that, and we made those designations as a way to show the world that we're not just abandoned village sites, and that we're people who belong to these lands and waters, and that we're still using the area. So all of those dates that Ernie is talking about are, they are milestones in moving forward to showing how we, that these are, Haida Gwaii belongs to us kind of thing. And in 1993, the commitment to the marine area was written in. It wasn't detailed in any way, but there was already a commitment in the 1993 Gwaii Haanas agreement to move towards a marine agreement, taking care of the marine area in Gwaii Haanas. And it took a long time to get from 93 to 2010, but it was done, and that's all I have to add there.
Okay, next one, Beck. So the next one is around so this is a section of the first page of that 1993 agreement, and it's an interesting agreement because and if you look at the clauses on the slide here, it looks like a disagreement, because the Haida Nation is pretty clear on who owns Gwaii Haanas, and it's not the government of Canada. And the government of Canada is also pretty clear on who owns the place, and it's not the Haida Nation. So it's an agreement to disagree on who owns the area, but then the agreement goes on to talk about, despite these diverging viewpoints on ownership, the agreement talks about how can we work together to achieve some of those things that we have in common, and some of those common objectives around looking after the area for much the same reasons that Elder Marshall was talking about earlier. It's to look after this area properly, so that future generations can enjoy that place in the same way that we have the privilege of enjoying it today. So that the agreement allows us to set aside those bigger issues, around title that are, they're continuing to be resolved through the courts. There's some legal proceedings. There's also some negotiations underway to resolve the title issue. But it allows those bigger things to be set aside, and assigns the looking after the place to the Archipelago Management Board in the meantime. And we felt it's really important to be able to set those bigger issues aside, because if we wait for Indigenous title cases to work their way through the courts, or negotiations to take place, by the time we conclude those things, there's going to be nothing left to protect. So this allows things to be set aside while other discussions are taking place, and allows us to work together and manage. Cindy?
So, Ernie's already said it in one way, but this was about finding common ground as well, agreeing to disagree on ownership for the time being, and finding common ground. And I remember as a younger Haida woman just feeling relief, and how brilliant that was for our leaders of the day to work this out so that we could protect a portion of our lands, and while we were still working towards protecting all of Haida Gwaii. And to me, I always saw us as setting an example of how this could be done, and this work, and I'm not sure if that's going to be in the slides later on, but this works towards reconciliation. This is reconciliation. This is how we do things. This is how it's going to have to be done, because I always say it's not the truth unless everyone wins. And so this was a great and respectful way to finally start building a relationship between a government that we didn't trust at all, and still don't sometimes. We all see what their actions have done in residential schools and whatnot, but it was, you know, just a respectful way to find some common ground and just agree to protect the area for our own reasons. Parks Canada had their specific reasons regarding why they wanted it protected, and so did the Haida Nation. And so we found a way to do that together, and we've been building that relationship ever since. And the following slides will talk to more of that. Oh, well.
So the agreement also speaks to a governance structure or management structure that will be put in place, and that's the Archipelago Management Board that Cindy and I have had the opportunity to play a role on for quite a while now. And so there's 6 members on the board. There's 3 members that are appointed by the Haida Nation, and 3 that represent the Government of Canada. So there's 2 from Parks Canada and 1 from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And we work very closely with Fisheries and Oceans with the marine conservation area and commercial and recreational fishing issues. It's an interesting board in that we all come to the board with our full authorities, respective authorities, so that Cindy comes with her authorities that are passed down through the President of the Haida Nation and the Haida Constitution. I come with my authorities passed down through the Minister of Environment, through the National Parks Act and the National Marine Conservation Areas Act, and the fisheries guy, he comes with his authorities, and we have so we make decisions on any issue related to operating or managing or planning, variety of issues. And we have a full consensus decision-making process. So we either all agree on an issue or we all disagree. And if we don't, then we don't make a decision. We park it until we can make a decision. Sometimes it gets parked for a year or so. We also have some dispute resolution clauses in both of the agreements for both the terrestrial and the marine area, where we can bump things up for resolution at more senior levels of our organization as well. But we try really hard to resolve things at our table. And so the other interesting thing about the decision-making process is if you read the agreements, they're actually the decisions the board makes are actually recommendations, and the recommendations are made to both Haida and Canada's governments. But the individuals who sit on the board have the authority to make those decisions. So the recommendations that we make automatically become decisions because we have the authority to make the decisions while we're sitting there. Cindy?
So I just want to mention that for many years with the Gwaii Haanas agreement, our board was made up of 4 members, 2 Haida, 2 Canada. And once the marine agreement was signed, then we added 2 more, 1 for each side. And so, you know, again, another learning curve on how we were going to work things out together, and with DFO on board, and you know, the long relationship with Department of Fisheries and the First Nations people, and how that hasn't been so great over the years. So we had our work cut out once that happened, and I'm happy to say that we've resolved a lot of that now since 2010, and have a good working relationship. But then now that the marine agreement is signed and we have a Land Sea People plan, then now we're going to have to start implementing what that plan says. And so we'll get down to the nitty gritty of that and see how we can take it from there.
So this decision-making process it's been challenged in court as well, right up to the Federal Court of Appeal. They actually applied for it to go to the Supreme Court, and it wasn't accepted to go there. But essentially, it was over a business license, and so what had happened is I had signed a business license through my authority under the National Parks Act and issued a license to a commercial operator. And Cindy also signed that same business license. So there's two signatures on all our approvals, any kind of permits or licenses or project approvals. There's always two authorities, Haida and Canada, that approve these things. And so we got taken to court, and it was suggested that Canada had fettered our minister's authority by allowing the Haida Nation to approve that business license. But you know what the panel of judges said in the end was, it doesn't matter how many signatures you have on that business license, as long as the person with the authority under the act has signed it, then you're fine. So anyways, it didn't go anywhere. But this it was what was also really interesting was this statement that the courts also said was, it's a really and I'm not going to read it, but it's a really innovative process and an innovative way of making a decision without actually having to say whose authority it was made under. And that's really important for Cindy and our other Haida Nation colleagues on the board, as well as our Fisheries and Oceans colleague, is to be able to come together, make a decision, and then leave and be able to say, I just made that decision under my authority, not under Canada's or Haida's, or it was under my authority, regardless of who you represent. Cindy?
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to, Ernie just sort of smoothed over and talked about, you know, how it succeeded in the end, but it was not pretty for a long time. And this is what you have to deal with when you're building relationships. And I think it's important to point out, this is a good place to point it out as any, that, you know, like the person that we were dealing with was writing letter after letter to the AMB, calling us a Gwaii Haanas police state, and you know, it was nasty for a long time. And so having that decision helped us just sort of exhale again and not have to be so on guard. And so there were a lot of things to work out, and lots of things, you know, that once they've passed and we're all on calmer seas again, you forget all of that stuff, but they do come up, and it's working together, as Ernie just described, that allows us to get through them as partners and as a whole, rather than I made this decision as a Haida, on behalf of the Haida Nation, and Ernie made it on behalf of Canada. But together at that table, we become one, and we bring that forward as a team. And then that helps both of our governments make stronger decisions regarding that kind of stuff.
So yeah, just one more thing on our governance structure here. So there, in this image, you can see the Archipelago Management Board and the six people there, and we've got a lot going on, and much as Cindy and I like to think we're doing everything, we've got a big team that works around us as well. And so we have a technical team with an individual from Parks Canada, individual from the Council of the Haida Nation, CHN, and TFO is Fisheries and Oceans Canada, who work full-time helping to implement some of the A&B responsibilities and objectives. And we also have teams, like we've got a team of, I don't know, probably 70 Parks Canada employees here. The Haida Nation has a great big team, and as does Fisheries and Oceans, who also feed into the work that we do. We have an advisory committee that will speak in a couple of slides here, maybe the next slide, on a management plan that we've just put in place. And so we had an advisory committee that with representation from some traditional knowledge holders, community members, commercial fishing folks, recreational fishing folks, tourism folks, environmental folks, who are providing advice on the development of our plan. Worked with the commercial fishing industry as well, and some of the changes that we made to through the development of this most recent plan had some pretty significant implications for the commercial fishing industry, and yeah, a number of other stakeholders. So lots of people helping and lots of people involved. We'll go to the next one, Beck. So one of the first things we did when we set out to develop this most recent management plan is we adopted 6 guiding principles that were based on ethics and values, or grounded in Haida law, and we used each of these principles to guide our entire planning process, and use these during our consultations. They were very helpful in helping the management board, the A&B, be able to explain to stakeholders and fishing industry and others why we were doing things and why it was important to do things. And yeah, it was a real good opportunity to educate mostly the fishing industry, I think, on why this area is so significant from a cultural perspective, not just an ecological and an economic perspective, but it's very important to the Haida Nation from a cultural perspective as well. And so these principles really helped us in being able to do that. And the other interesting thing, these are grounded in Haida law, but it's interesting how each one of these 6 principles align with ecosystem-based management principles and objectives that you find in scientific literature. So it really lines up with cultural and ecological objectives. Cindy?
I just want to mention, again, this was a piece that was, we depended a lot on the team that we had in place. Hillary Thorpe was one of them. She led the development of the Land Sea People Plan, and that took a lot of work, and it also took a lot of relationship building and initial relationship building that brought us all together to talk about what the challenges and concerns and issues were. And those early days of when we started to talk about a zoning plan, and the fishermen were so irate, and all those meetings, I feel this is important, because this is what makes it successful in the end, because you don't leave anything out and you just go through the process as it needs to be done. And those meetings with fishermen helped us to eventually, I mean, there was yelling and there was fear and there was swearing and there was like stomping out of rooms, and Hillary and Kathy just stood in front of that room and they just kept giving the information in a clear and balanced way, and we all spoke when we needed to as we went along. But I'm really proud of that relationship that we built with the fishing industry, because it was tough. It was really tough. And not only did they learn about who we were as Haida people and who we were as the AMB, but we learned that it wasn't just about a commercial activity for them. It was a way of life. And it's something that never occurred to me until we had those tough discussions over and over with them, why the fear was. And so I sat there wondering why they couldn't see the writing on the wall, and why don't they just, you know, in my head, all this was going on. And then it occurred to me, as things do when you're working through process like that, the fear was not about the money. It was about a way of life that they'd lived all their lives and that they had hoped to pass on to children. The ocean had become part of them as well. And so me understanding that finally brought me to a different way of having the discussion with them, and understanding that we weren't so different after all. And so that was a really big piece. And I think in anything we do, that's the kind of process we need to be involved in order to be successful.
So I mentioned management plan. So we had this plan approved in 2018. This plan, just going back to those two agreements, the 93 agreement and the 2010 Marine agreement. So there's the, you know, in addition to what we've talked about with respect to those agreements already, they assign some responsibilities to the management board. And one of those responsibilities include the development of a management plan that will serve as kind of like a blueprint for how the AMB manages the area. And then we also have to review those and rewrite those from time to time. I think it's every 10 years or something. They also, so in addition to satisfying those two nation-to-nation agreements, the National Parks Act requires Parks Canada, and so does the National Marine Conservation Areas Act, to have a management plan in place for national park reserves and marine conservation area reserves. So this plan was developed by the Haida Nation, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and Parks Canada, and satisfies the requirements of those two political agreements and a couple of acts as well. And one of the most significant changes that came about through this plan is we reduced the commercial fishing industry, or commercial fishing footprint, by just over 40%. And so there's about 40%, just over 40 is set aside as a strict protected area. I'll stop there. Cindy? Oops, sorry.
I'm good here. Perfect.
Okay. Did you want to start one, Cindy, or you want me to keep going?
Seems almost appropriate that I might want to start this one, but I get lost in the weeds on this Hideaway Watchmen program. I'm just going to say that many years ago, I ran that Watchman program for 13 and a half years, almost 14 years. And so was there from the start, and it was those watchmen who are down in that area where nobody lives except them during the summer were ambassadors for all of the Haida Nation and basically all of Haida Gwaii. And their job, their role was to protect the area, make sure nobody was taking off pieces of poles or picking up artifacts, that kind of thing, and also to establish a presence down there so that people knew they weren't abandoned villages, these were our homelands. And so that program has played a really significant role in helping us move things forward. I was a watchman at one time, and we were watchmen in 1982, I think, so long before the designation of it being a Haida heritage site. And I also mentioned earlier that that designation was for the rest of the world, not for us, because we already know it's ours. And so you know, that's just sort of skimming over Ernie and I do a lot of we're asked to do a lot of sort of interviews or give information on that program, because people want, they see the success of it and want to do it in other places in the world. And we've had people come from, you know, for the Watchman program and for what the AMB does from as far away as New Zealand, for instance. And so so really what they're doing is just protecting the area for, well, not just, but protecting the area for us, and actually monitoring and reporting more than anything. And we're always looking at expanding that program so it works more efficiently for the things we need to know to manage the whole area better. Ernie?
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Yeah, and as the slide says, and so it was formally established in 81, and prior to that there was community members traveling down to some of these more significant cultural sites and looking after them as well. But it was formally established under the Skidegate Band Council in 1981, and now today there's 5 different sites that are occupied from May to September. You know, and as Cindy said, their primary role is to kind of watch over and guard the sites, protect the sites. But the way they do that is quite interesting. The way they do it is by being there when people come ashore and come to visit, and they share the personal connections, personal stories that they have with each one of these sites. And those personal stories is the way the Watchmen help to educate visitors and on the need to protect and look after these places and be respectful while you're there. But they also, those experiences that visitors have with the Watchmen result in some of the most memorable experiences that people have when they come to Haida Gwaii as well. So it's a very, very important program for us. And it's similar to the, you know, we hear a lot of discussion lately around developing new, there's quite a few guardian programs across the country now, more and more in Indigenous territories, and so this is one of the original ones, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so I just want to mention something, because originally we had Burnaby Narrows, which is a very sensitive site and lots of different things to look at. And we had a Watchman site at Burnaby Narrows, and we decided somewhere along the way that that wasn't a very good idea, and so removed the site in order to protect the area, because as long as the Watchmen were there, visitors were always going to stop there, and they were going to stomp all over all the sensitive things that were underwater at low tide and all that stuff. And I think that's important to mention, just because as First Nations people, it was, you know, we tried it. We thought it was a good area because it was in between Midway and Skungwai, which is a long way down there, down south, and it became clear after a few years that that wasn't probably wasn't the best place to have a site for protecting the area and the impact on the area it was having. And so as Haida, we just decided no more, and it wasn't a very popular decision at first, but here we are all these years later, and people have learned to go through those narrows respectfully, float through at low tide rather than get out and walk around and stomp on everything. And the other thing I wanted to say was I did say that they're there to protect the area, and they're not sort of tour guides necessarily, but they're also, some of them are happy to do that, like talk to visitors and take them through the village sites. And but we learned really quickly that as long as they do stuff like that, then they're educating the visitors, who in turn help us protect the area. And that's a really big thing. I just rolled that off my tongue, but the fact that they learn more about the poles and the stories the poles tell, for instance, and the grave sites that they're walking by, helps them understand who we are as Haida, and they in turn help us look after the area.
So there's a few other things you would see if you had the opportunity to visit Gwaii Haanas, and it's quite a remote area. There's no road access, so it's only accessible by water or air, and it's difficult to get to. Haida Gwaii is difficult to get to, and Gwaii Haanas is much more difficult to get to. And it's, I had mentioned earlier, it's a place where Haida people continue to go down and food gather. You can see a picture of some young people on the slide here. There's a rediscovery camp in Gwaii Haanas where youth go down for a week or 10 days at a time and learn how to live off the land and learn new life skills. We have about 3,000 visitors each year, and most of them travel with commercial operators. It's if you don't know the area or don't know the waters, it's a risky place to travel as well. And people, when they go, there's so much effort to get there. People generally stay for a few days once they're there. So some of these tours will be anywhere from, there's a few day trips you can do. You won't see much in a day, but some of them are week-long trips and 2-week kayak trips. So yeah, different opportunities for visiting. I mentioned there's about 12 commercial fisheries that take place down there as well right now. Good, Cindy?
I'm good.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to just share with you some of the lessons that we've learned over the last quarter century or so. On the next slide, Beck. And so since the beginning, it's been really important for the A&B to make culture a priority. And as I mentioned when we were talking about those principles in the management plan, that was our first priority, was to get those cultural priorities adopted and out there and have them guide the entire process. And this is important for a number of reasons, but I think most importantly is like when we look around anywhere, look around the world at protected areas anywhere, they fall within Indigenous territories. So it's important that we respect that right from the beginning, and that's something that we've tried to do here in Gwaii Haanas. And if you have a chance to look through that management plan, we call it the Land Sea People Plan, you'll see those 6 principles, and you'll see Haida language and place names used where we can throughout that document. And you'll also see some cultural objectives in that plan as well.
So here I go. So Gwaii Haanas, my village site is not technically in those boundaries, but to me, all of that is homelands, and all of Haida Gwaii to somebody, to all of us, you know, up north has their own villages as well. But one of the things that I always talk about is if everyone could go down there even for a day, we'd have a different world, just because a place like Gwaii Haanas, and there are many places, sacred places in this world, a place like Gwaii Haanas, for me, is my peace with the planet. It's where I feel like I belong. It's that sense of belonging that I get when I go there, because I come from there. It tells me that I do belong somewhere, and that I have, and my mother did, and her mother did, and her mother did, as far back as we can remember. And so, you know, once a year, the AMB takes a trip down there. I mean, COVID's thrown a little bit of a kink into that, but once a year we go down for 5 days, just so that we don't forget why we're sitting at that table and why we do what we do. And I said a bit about it earlier, but every day I feel lucky I get to get up and do something that I love, that feels so important to me, but not only me, but the rest of the world as well. So, you know, we're just a little speck on the map, yet we forge so many paths and trails for everybody that's trying to do the same thing. And I always say that I thought that Gwaii Haanas could be an example for the rest of Haida Gwaii, for the rest of BC, and now I see it's an example for the rest of the world as well in so many ways. And so what I do here is so much more than a job. It's so much more than a paycheck. It's residential school, smallpox, residential school, smallpox brought everybody into one or two, well, 2 villages on this island. Some people ended up in Alaska from Haida Gwaii at a place called Heidelberg, but all along the coast, this happened to all of us. This sort of breaking us up and putting us in different areas that we weren't familiar with. And so residential schools broke us. They did what they did. And every time a pole is raised like that one in Gwaii Haanas at Windy Bay, it heals some of that. Every single time, I believe that's what it does. It doesn't matter where it is. These poles in Haida Gwaii that get raised heal everybody. The energy just goes out there. And so what we're doing here is we're healing, building this relationship together, finding things that are important to us both, the common things. We're just people after all, and this is what we need to do for ourselves. And if we could help the rest of the world by doing it, then yay us, right? And so I'm so grateful that I get to work with the people I work with, and I'm grateful that I get to protect Haida Gwaii, my homelands, in some way. So many, all those things that I was talking about, smallpox, residential schools, they took us away from who we are. They took us away from our lands. And so we weren't able to be those people anymore, but we're on our way back now. And we're on our way back because the land held on for us. The waters have held on for us. And now it's our turn to get in there and protect where we can for so many deeper reasons than just fishing, but the food, the all of that keeps us whole and healthy. That's the oceans, and the oceans are connected to the lands, and we're connected to both those things. And so we're not just playing around here. We're healing ourselves, and we're healing for the rest of the world as well, while they catch up in their way of thinking again. And so I'm grateful to be here with you and be able to say these things and be able to pass on information that might help in some small way in your own areas. We're all, so many of us are just coastal people who are just on the ground watching as it disappears or gets taken over. And Haida, we're lucky here because we're not overrun by urban areas, and so we get to push things forward in a way that maybe other nations can't, and build those relationships in ways that you can't because of that energy that's so close to you, that's just so disconnected. And so Hawa, for having us here today and allowing me to say this here at the end. Hawa.
Thanks, Cindy. We're not quite done yet, though.
Oh, I thought that was the last slide.
No, not quite. So you're gonna have to say that again at the end, I guess. No, I think that's a really important. Thanks for sharing that. So just yeah, we got a few more. How are we for time, Heidi? Do we need to pick up the pace here?
We're just closing in on 7, so maybe 5 to 10 minutes max. Does that sounds good?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, we're taking a little bit too long here. So this next one is around. This lesson is around finding common ground, and we've talked a little bit about this already. It's really important to be able to build those relationships and have conversations, and so you can figure out what those common grounds are, and also figure out, you know, what are those things that we're not going to agree on, and have a process for setting those things aside. And it's important at the board level to have these discussions and build these relationships, but it's also important with stakeholders and others that we're needing to work with and consider in some of the decisions that we make as well. And there's always some common ground with everybody. Even you know, you wouldn't think there's common ground with the commercial fishing industry, and when you're trying to establish marine protected areas, but there is. They have an interest in having things looked after properly as well, so that they can continue on and their future generations can continue with a way of life as well. So, anything on this one, Cindy?
Yeah. When we talk about focus on areas of agreement and don't sweat the small stuff, Ernie as the co-chair has been very good at keeping us on track with things that are not getting caught in the weeds. I mean, sometimes we do, but I think the trick to all of this, including what I just talked about, the healing, all of it, is just keep your eyes on the prize. What is it we're doing here? What is the bigger picture? I mean, there's lots to do in between all of that, but what is it we're trying to accomplish really? You know, like, what does that mean for you as individuals? What does it mean for the table?
Okay, the next one. So this next one is around building trust, and trust. Trust is not an easy thing, and it's not something you can assume either. It takes time to build the trust. So you need to build the necessary time to do that. And Cindy spoke a little bit about how things were not that easy at times, and you know, one of them was with a court case, but things haven't always been that easy at the management board table as well, especially in the early days. And fortunately, Cindy and I weren't on the board in the early days, but you know, we were around and witnessing some of the conflict between Parks Canada and the Haida Nation, and it was a process that folks were going through to develop trust, and it took probably 5 years or so to really build a trusting relationship. And then when initially the board had 4 members on it, 2 Haida, 2 Parks Canada, and then when we established the Marine Conservation Area, we added another member on each side, and another partner came to the table, Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And again, we had to go through a process. There was some pretty bumpy rides and some pretty tough discussions for a couple of years, but I feel like we're over that hump there now too, and so it takes time to build trust, and you need to recognize that, keep working at it, but to be successful, I feel like you need that trust to be in place.
Yeah, I don't need to say that twice, but I do want to say something about hiring. So we hire, our goal is always to get Haida people in the door, and not only in the door, but in management positions. And for all of the reasons I spoke about earlier, that's difficult at this stage, but we continue to work on it. But what I call myself the interview queen, because I've been doing it so long, longer than I've been on the ANB. But there's always a Haida person present at any hiring we do, because we want to do our utmost to make sure that that person is suitable to work in this cross-cultural environment. And the couple of times that we've done it, not been able to suss that out properly, have brought us nothing but grief. And so that's a really important piece, I think, to building trust as well.
The next one is around engaging together, and we learned this lesson going through the management planning process, and our external or our consultation process. We did it together. DFO, Parks Canada, and Haida Nation went to all these different public meetings and meeting with industry groups. We did it together, and I feel like that was. It really paid off. It was a lot of work, but it really paid off, and sends a pretty clear message when you're all together presenting a unified front. And there were times like the Haida Nation has their own internal processes for engaging community members. Same with DFO and fishing industry and Parks Canada. And it's not necessary to go to all those meetings, but be available to be there to support your partners. One of the other things we did was we tried to bring along people who had an established, that we spoke about trust earlier, somebody who had an established level of trust. So we would, like Parks Canada, would never go into a Haida community meeting without Haida members sitting there with us, or we would never go to meet with the commercial fishing industry unless we had Haida commercial fishermen or other commercial fishermen with us who had that level of trust to help us with those discussions and help us build those relationships that are so important to be successful.
I'm good.
Okay. And this last one is to see cooperative governments or cooperative management as an opportunity, and it's like working together it's not easy, and a lot of times it actually takes a lot longer to make. Well, it does take longer to make decisions and work through processes where you have more than one person making a decision. But I feel like in the end, like when the ANB makes a decision, we're able to take much more into consideration than I would have on my own if I was to make all the same decisions. And they're also, those decisions are more supported once you get outside of your office room where you've made your decision as well. Like I've been criticized in public meetings and had Haida members of the Archipelago Management Board stand up and in community meetings on Haida Gwaii here, and had Haida members of the board stand up and say, that wasn't his decision, that was my decision under my authority. And so it changes the reaction to some of the things that we do. And we often hear, probably something I hear more than Cindy as a federal public servant is, we often hear, be careful what you do, because you're gonna set a precedent in what you're doing that we're gonna be asked to repeat somewhere else in Canada. And I think we need to find ways to flip that thinking around and still be careful what we do, because we're going to set precedents, but set those precedents and do them right, so that we can use them in other places. Like, see it as an opportunity rather than as a barrier. And I'm going to stop there, Cindy, and I'll leave it to you to wrap up.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about myself, not because I want to tell you about myself so much, but tell you about the process and why I've in my whole life I felt like I've been some kind of bridge. I couldn't articulate it when I was younger, but as I grew older and started my healing journey and working with the people that I've worked with and doing the things I've done, it came more clear to me that it's been a big part of my purpose, is to come and be a bridge on this earth. And my father was a big 6'5" Ukrainian man, and my mom was like a little 5'2" Haida powerhouse. And as maybe you don't all know, but in the Hideaway you follow your mother, so born, just lucky to be born Indigenous, I guess. But I see and feel that was a big part of my purpose. And so as I got older, what I bring now to the table is that feeling, that confidence that that's what I've come to be here. And if I can't help with that, what can I help with? And so we have to ask ourselves the question when we're applying to be on boards like this. And sometimes we don't get to ask that because there's only so many of us to go around in our First Nations communities, for instance. Why is it important for you to be to sit on a board like this? Like, what is it? What is it that makes it important for you? If it's just money, don't do it. Just not going to happen that way. What if it's more than that? And you don't even need to tell anybody. You just have to know it yourself. And that sense of belonging from being in Gwaii Haanas helped me to gain the confidence and know that stuff about myself. It brought me back to who I am. And so I felt like I needed to say that because, because I don't need to go into all of that. We've taken a lot of time here, but it's just one of those important things in my life that brings me to a table such as the AMB and allows me to do important work for the Haida Nation, for myself, for the Haida Nation, and for other nations as well, for other people as well. And Hillary Thorpe and I are teaching co-management courses now. There's where we've got to, because we do have something to offer in that regard, and in how people can create success in this area. So I just want to say how for having us here, and Ernie is one of the people that I respect most in this world, and we've built this long relationship together, him and I, and I'm really proud to be part of it. And I'm really honored that we continue to get asked to come and share our experience and our feelings and our knowledge with you. So how for having us here.
Hawa, Cindy. Hawa, Ernie, thank you so much for your, not a presentation, but your story and your journey. And at this point, what I'm going to do is call this part a close to our presentation formally. And at this point, we're going to turn off the recording. And so it's a thank you for the formal part of our presentation.